"You don't belong up here." That single sentence, spoken loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear, was about to cost a woman everything she had spent 12 years building. And the man she said it to hadn't even opened his mouth yet. If you've ever been judged before you said a single word, stay with me until the end of this one, because what happens on this flight will make you rethink everything you assume about the people sitting next to you. Elijah Carter walked onto Liberty Skyways, Flight 8112, wearing a plain charcoal hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen a few years of wear. Nothing about him screamed wealth or power. Nothing about him screamed anything at all, except maybe the quiet, unhurried way he carried himself, like a man who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. He found his row, glanced at the overhead numbers, and stepped towards seat 2A. That's when Diane Holloway stepped directly into his path. Diane had been a flight attendant for Liberty Skyways for 12 years. She knew this cabin better than she knew her own living room. She knew, or believed she knew, exactly who belonged in it. And the man standing in front of her, in a hoodie that had never seen an iron, did not fit the picture in her head. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough to draw a few curious glances from nearby seats. "First class is for premium passengers only. Coach is that way." Elijah held up his boarding pass without a flicker of irritation. "This is my seat. 2A. Diane barely glanced at it. She let out a short laugh, the kind that isn't really a laugh at all, more like a verdict already reached. "That's got to be a mistake. Let me see some identification." He handed over his driver's license without protest. She held it up at arm's length, turning it over like she suspected it might be printed on cardboard. "This doesn't match anything on our manifest," she said. "You'll need to take your assigned seat in the back. Could you check again? Confirmation number, Romeo Tango 457991. Diane's fingers moved across her tablet, but her expression didn't change. Whatever the screen told her, she had already decided not to believe it. "Sir, I've done this job for 12 years. I know when someone doesn't belong in this cabin." 3 rows back, a woman named Melissa Tran quietly lifted her phone and pressed record. She wasn't trying to start anything. She just had a feeling, the kind you get in your stomach before you can explain it in words, that something worth remembering was about to happen. Her thumb hovered over the live stream button. She pressed it. Within a minute, 40 people were watching. The comments started arriving before the plane had even pushed back from the gate. Elijah pulled out his phone and pulled up the digital version of his boarding pass. "Seat 2A, Premium Select. Confirmed." He held the screen toward her, patient, steady, not a hint of pleading in his voice. Diane waved it away without looking. "Anyone can fake one of those. I need your original purchase receipt." "I shouldn't have to prove that I'm allowed to sit in a seat I legally purchased," Elijah said quietly. "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassing yourself." Diane shot back. "Just take an open seat in coach, and we'll straighten this out after takeoff." A man in 4A leaned into the aisle, trying to smooth things over. Maybe he upgraded with miles at the last second. It happens all the time. Diane's response came fast, and it came sharp. "Those upgrades go to our real frequent flyers. People who actually belong up here." The word real hit different ears differently. Melissa's stream jumped past 200 viewers. A comment scrolled by. "This is disgusting. Someone call the captain." Elijah's hand drifted briefly to the inside pocket of his jacket. Something small and metallic caught the cabin light for half a second. He didn't pull it out. Not yet. He simply waited, the way a man waits when he already knows how a story ends and is only curious how long it will take everyone else to catch up. 5 minutes to departure. Diane keyed her radio, and her supervisor, Gregory Reyes, appeared at the front of the cabin with the harried look of a man who had 100 other things to do before wheels up. "What's going on here, Diane? This passenger is claiming he belongs in first class. I've checked 3 times. He's not on the premium list. I'm Elijah Carter, Elijah said, holding out the boarding pass again, his tone still level, still calm. Seat 2A. This is not complicated. Gregory took the pass and studied it with the exact same skepticism his subordinate had shown, as if suspicion were something you could catch from standing too close to someone. This could be a printing error. Let me check the manifest myself. He tapped through his own tablet, and his eyebrows lifted a fraction. It shows 2A assigned to E. Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter Aerospace Solutions. The cabin went quiet enough to hear the hum of the air vents. Diane's face flushed red, and instead of stepping back, she leaned further in. That's obviously not him. A CEO would board in the priority group, in a suit, not dressed like that. 3 minutes to departure. Melissa's stream had crossed 800 viewers. A man in seat 1C had started his own recording on a different platform, narrating in a hushed, excited whisper, the kind of whisper that spreads faster than any shout ever could. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one final time," Diane said, her voice rising, to take an open seat in the back. "We have a schedule to keep." Elijah's hand returned to his jacket pocket, fingers closing around something solid this time. Still, he didn't reveal it. "I understand your position completely," he said. "I'd like to speak with the captain before we go any further." "The captain doesn't handle seating disputes," Diane snapped. "That's my call, and my decision is final." Passengers who had been idly scrolling through their phones moments earlier were now angling their cameras toward the aisle. The tension in the cabin had become something almost physical, a weight pressing down on every breath. "I'm calling security," Diane announced, reaching for the intercom. Elijah checked his watch, unhurried. "That's certainly your right, but you might want to make one phone call first." "To who exactly?" "To your own corporate office. Ask them about the Carter Aerospace maintenance contract signed last month." Diane's hand froze an inch from the radio. Something in the way Elijah said it, quiet, unbothered, absolutely certain, made the hair on the back of Gregory's neck stand up. This wasn't a man bluffing his way out of an argument. This was a man who already knew exactly how this ended, and was simply waiting for everyone else to arrive at the same conclusion. "What maintenance contract?" Gregory asked, stepping closer. Elijah's eyes never left Diane's increasingly pale face. "The $912 million annual maintenance and safety compliance agreement between Carter Aerospace Solutions and Liberty Skyways. The agreement that keeps roughly 4,000 of your mechanics, inspectors, and engineers employed across 11 states. Diane's tablet nearly slipped out of her trembling hands. Melissa's viewer count blew past 2,000. The hashtag Flight 82 had already started trending on 2 different platforms, a fire nobody in that cabin could put out now, not even with an apology. 1 minute past scheduled departure. The captain's voice crackled through the cabin speakers, tight with irritation. "Cabin crew, I need confirmation we are ready for departure." Now, Diane's finger hovered over the radio button, and the silence stretched so long that even the passengers holding their phones seemed to be holding their breath along with it. That's when Elijah reached into his jacket one final time. He withdrew a slim leather credential holder. Inside it, in plain view of Diane, Gregory, and half the cabin's phone cameras, sat a corporate identification badge. Elijah Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter Aerospace Solutions, the same company whose logo was stamped on engine housings across Liberty Skyways' entire domestic fleet. Diane's world tilted on its axis, and everyone in that cabin watched it happen in real time. She should have apologized right then. Everyone watching, everyone recording, everyone holding their breath expected her to. Instead, something in her, pride, fear, 12 years of certainty that refused to admit it had ever been wrong, made her double down instead. "Anyone can print a fake badge," she said, though her voice had lost every ounce of its earlier conviction. I've seen elaborate scams before. Gregory grabbed her arm. Diane, we need to end this now. No, David, I mean Gregory, she stammered, catching herself. I've seen this exact play before. Fake IDs. Counterfeit cards. He's probably studied our manifest and built a convincing story around it. Melissa's stream crossed 3,000 viewers. The comments had turned merciless. She's about to lose her job on camera. Someone stop this. Keep recording everything. Elijah's phone had been buzzing steadily in his pocket for the last several minutes. He hadn't answered a single call. Now he finally looked at the screen, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger. Something closer to resignation. Ma'am, he said, I'm going to make this very simple. Call your operations center. Ask for Angela Cruz in corporate partnerships. Tell her Elijah Carter needs to speak with her immediately. Diane's laugh came out brittle, desperate. You think name-dropping some random employee is going to save you? Angela Cruz, extension 4471. She handles our maintenance contract renewals personally. The specificity landed like a slap. Gregory's face changed. The particular kind of detail Diane had just dismissed wasn't the kind a con artist usually bothered to memorize. Diane, he said quietly, maybe we should actually verify this. I refuse to be manipulated, she snapped back, though her voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. 5 minutes delayed. Cabin crew, the captain barked again over the intercom. What exactly is happening back there? Diane keyed her radio with a shaking hand. Captain, we have a passenger refusing to take his assigned coach seat. Elijah stepped forward, calm as still water. Captain, this is Elijah Carter of Carter Aerospace Solutions. I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding about my seating. The intercom went silent for 3 full seconds, 3 seconds that felt, to everyone holding a phone in that cabin, like 3 hours. Then, Mr. Carter, this is unexpected. Please, give me 2 minutes. Diane's face went the color of old paper. The captain hadn't just recognized the name. She'd spoken to him with something close to respect. Whatever Diane had convinced herself of moments earlier evaporated in an instant, replaced by a dread that started somewhere in her stomach and climbed slowly up her spine. Elijah's phone rang again. This time he answered, on speaker, so the entire front section of the cabin could hear. Elijah? It's Angela. I just got word. There's a situation on Flight 812. Hello, Angela. There seems to be some confusion about my seat assignment and my identification. Let me get Captain Whitmore on this call right now. Captain, Elijah Carter is one of our most critical strategic partners. Carter Aerospace handles safety and maintenance compliance for over 1/3 of our entire domestic fleet. Captain Dana Whitmore's voice returned, tight with something that sounded a great deal like professional horror. Mr. Carter, I am so sorry for the inconvenience. Let me speak with my crew immediately. Diane backed against the galley wall, as if the plane itself had tilted beneath her. Melissa's stream crossed 5,000 viewers, shares multiplied by the second. The businessman in 1C had switched to narrating in full sentences now, feeding a growing audience of his own. Angela's voice continued through the speaker, almost apologetic in its warmth. Elijah, just so you know, we renewed your platinum executive status last week. Priority boarding, complimentary upgrades, dedicated support on every flight. I appreciate that, Angela, Elijah said. But I think there's a deeper issue here that needs to be addressed. 9 minutes delayed. The captain's voice came over the general cabin speakers this time, addressed to every passenger on board. Ladies and gentlemen, we're currently resolving a customer service matter that should never have happened in the first place. Flight attendants Holloway and Reyes, report to the flight deck immediately. Diane didn't move. She couldn't. The full shape of what she had done was finally, catastrophically clear to her, and it had happened in front of thousands of strangers who would never forget her face. She's about to lose everything live on camera. Someone typed in the stream, document all of it. Elijah slipped his phone back into his pocket. Ma'am, I don't want anyone to lose their job over this. Maybe we can still resolve it and move forward. I was doing my job, Diane said, her voice rising, cracking. I was protecting our premium passengers from people who don't belong up here. From what, exactly? Elijah asked quietly. Nobody answered. Nobody could. The question hung over the cabin like smoke that wouldn't clear, and every phone still recording captured the silence in full. That's when a new voice arrived, fast, urgent, carrying its own kind of panic. Bradley Sinclair, the station manager, came jogging down the jet bridge, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Mr. Carter, I'm Bradley Sinclair, station manager for this terminal. I need to speak with you immediately. I'm confident we can sort this out quickly, Mr. Sinclair. Sir, on behalf of Liberty Skyways, I want to personally apologize. This is completely unacceptable and does not represent our values. Diane found her voice, desperate now. Bradley, I was following protocol. We can't just let anyone claim premium seating without verification. Jennifer, stop talking. Sinclair caught himself and corrected. Diane, stop talking. Right now. Melissa's viewers crossed 8,000. A local news account had already picked up a clip and reposted it with the caption, "This needs to be seen." Sinclair kept going, his voice shaking with barely restrained fury. Mr. Carter, I've already spoken to our CEO directly. She asked me to personally apologize and ensure you receive our absolute highest level of service for the rest of this flight and every flight after it. Gentlemen, Elijah said, glancing at his watch, I appreciate the attention, but I do have a board meeting waiting for me in Los Angeles. Perhaps we could move things along. Sinclair nodded so fast it looked painful. Of course. Diane, escort Mr. Carter to his seat and provide him with anything he needs. Diane didn't move. I said now, Sinclair barked. I can't, she whispered. You can't do what, exactly? I can't admit I was wrong about this. The cabin went dead silent. Even the low hum of the engines seemed to fade beneath the weight of that sentence. I don't make mistakes about this, Diane said, louder now, almost defiant, as if saying it with more conviction might somehow make it true. I know exactly who belongs up here and who doesn't. Sinclair's face went from red to something closer to purple. Captain Whitmore's voice crackled through the intercom one final time, cold and final. That's enough. Security to the gate, immediately. Security officers stepped onto the jet bridge, and every camera in that cabin turned to capture it. This was the moment. This was the ending everyone watching had been waiting for. And then Elijah raised his hand, calm, unhurried, and stopped them before they reached her. There's something you all need to understand first, he said. He reached into his briefcase, not for more identification this time, but for a thin folder, the kind that looks unremarkable right up until the moment it isn't. 3 weeks ago, Elijah said, Carter Aerospace was contracted by Liberty Skyways Board of Directors to conduct a full, independent audit of customer service practices across every domestic route. This flight was a designated test scenario. Sinclair's face drained of every last drop of color. An audit of what, exactly? He managed. Discriminatory practices in premium cabin access, Elijah said. This flight was chosen specifically. Melissa's stream exploded past 12,000 viewers as she zoomed in on the folder in Elijah's hand, the corporate letterhead, the executive signatures, unmistakably real. Diane's knees buckled. She sank into the nearest jump seat, burying her face in her hands. No, that's not possible. The audit was requested by your own board, Elijah continued, his voice never rising, never needing to, following 23 formal discrimination complaints filed over the last 2 quarters. Every one of them involved passengers of color being denied access to seats they had legitimately purchased. Sinclair was typing frantically on his phone, his hands visibly shaking. The test was simple, Elijah said, turning slightly to address the cabin full of raised phones as much as the crew in front of him. A qualified passenger of color, attempts to access a first-class seat he legitimately purchased. We document the response and any pattern of bias in how that response unfolds. A teenager, recording from the coach cabin over the seat divider, called out, "So, you're basically a secret shopper for discrimination?" Elijah allowed himself the smallest tired smile. Something close to that, except instead of rating the food, we're auditing whether people get treated with basic dignity. Sinclair's phone rang. The caller ID read, CEO Patricia Vance. His face went the color of ash as he answered. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, he's here. The audit is happening right now. No, ma'am. It is not going well." Diane looked up, eyes red and hollow. "Bradley, please tell me this is some kind of joke." Sinclair covered the phone with his palm. "Diane, you just failed the most important test of your entire career. On camera. In front of 30,000 people. 30,000. The number had climbed that fast, and it was still climbing. Elijah opened the folder fully now, reading from it in a measured, almost gentle voice. The voice of a man delivering a verdict he took no pleasure in. Employee Holloway denied valid documentation 4 separate times. She dismissed a legitimate boarding pass, a government ID, and a confirmed reservation number, each time escalating rather than de-escalating. When supervisory intervention occurred, she refused to acknowledge any possibility of error. And she explicitly stated on record that she personally decides, quote, who belongs in first class and who doesn't. Each sentence landed like a physical blow. Diane flinched at every one of them, and every flinch was captured from at least 3 different angles. Gregory stepped forward, visibly shaken. "Mr. Carter, I want it noted that I attempted to intervene. I recognized the behavior had become inappropriate. That's already noted in the preliminary report, Mr. Reyes," Elijah said. "You attempted to de-escalate. That will be reflected accordingly." 15 minutes delayed. Sinclair finished his call and turned to Elijah, his composure entirely gone. "Sir, our CEO is requesting an emergency conference with you and our full executive leadership. Immediately." "Of course," Elijah said. "But first I think Miss Holloway deserves to fully understand where things stand." He turned to face her directly. Diane looked up at him like a woman waiting for a sentence to be read. "The audit didn't just track the initial denial," Elijah said. "Tracked your response to evidence. Your willingness, or lack of it, to seek help. Your treatment of a passenger throughout an extended, unnecessary confrontation. Every layer mattered. What exactly did I do wrong?" Diane asked, and the question hung in the air, less like a defense and more like a confession that she genuinely didn't know. "You denied valid documentation 4 times, Elijah said, calm and methodical. You refused to check the manifest when directly asked. You made assumptions based entirely on appearance. You escalated a resolvable situation into a crisis, and when given every opportunity to reconsider, you chose, each time, not to." Diane had no answer. There wasn't one to give. Elijah closed the folder. "The good news, if there is any in this, is that this creates a real opportunity, if you're willing to take it." 20 minutes delayed. The captain's voice returned over the cabin speakers, addressed to every passenger. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently completing a customer service review. We thank you for your patience as we work to do better." Even the flight was now part of the unfolding accountability. Elijah opened his laptop and connected to a video call. The screen flickered to life, revealing CEO Patricia Vance and 5 other senior executives crowded into a conference room 1,000 miles away. "Elijah," Vance said, her expression a portrait of controlled panic. "I understand we have a serious situation." "The situation is exactly what your board contracted us to uncover, Patricia," Elijah said. "A systemic pattern of discriminatory customer service, and unfortunately, today's results confirm the worst of our projections." The chief financial officer's voice cracked through the call, tight with barely concealed alarm. "Elijah, our stock is already reacting. We're down 3% in the last 40 minutes. Social sentiment is overwhelmingly negative across every platform. Diane's voice was barely a whisper. They're talking about the stock price. Because of me? Miss Holloway, Elijah said, not unkindly. Liberty Skyways carries over 180 million passengers a year. A single failure like this doesn't just affect one traveler. It affects shareholders, employees, and an entire industry's reputation. Melissa's stream had now surpassed 20,000 viewers. National outlets were reaching out to her directly, asking for permission to broadcast her footage. Vance leaned toward the camera. Elijah, what corrective action do you recommend? Elijah stood, addressing both the screen and the cabin full of witnesses at once. Comprehensive anti-bias training for every customer-facing employee within 30 days. A full rewrite of your boarding dispute protocols, requiring secondary verification before any premium seat is challenged. A public independent passenger advocacy channel for reporting future incidents, and full transparency published quarterly. And if we decline any part of that? Vance asked, though her voice made clear she already knew the answer. Our maintenance and safety compliance contract includes a termination clause tied specifically to conduct during audit periods, Elijah said evenly. Non-compliance would allow Carter Aerospace to withdraw from that agreement within 90 days. That would ground a significant portion of your domestic fleet. The silence on that call could have filled the entire cabin. Vance closed her eyes briefly. We'll comply with every requirement. Immediately. And Ms. Holloway? Elijah asked. Vance's answer was measured, careful, suspended pending completion of a full retraining program. Whether she returns depends entirely on that outcome. Diane looked up one last time, her voice raw. Mr. Carter, do you honestly believe someone can change after something like this? Elijah considered her for a long moment. That depends entirely on you, Miss Holloway, not on me. 31 minutes delayed, Flight 8112 finally pushed back from the gate. But the story didn't end on that tarmac. It was only beginning. Within 72 hours, the video had been viewed past 4 million times. The hashtag had climbed into national trending lists. News networks picked up Melissa's footage with her permission, and Liberty Skyways found itself facing the exact crisis its own leadership had feared most. A discrimination scandal playing out in real time, in front of an audience that would not look away. Diane Holloway reported to a retraining center a week later, one of 41 employees across the company who had failed similar audit checkpoints in recent months. It wasn't framed as punishment. It was framed deliberately as reconstruction. Dr. Renata Osei, a nationally respected consultant on workplace bias, led the program. We are not here to humiliate anyone, she told the group on the first morning. We are here to understand how unconscious assumptions shape real decisions, and to build the tools to do better consistently every single day. Diane's first assignment was watching her own confrontation, the one that had by then been viewed millions of times by strangers who would never know anything else about her. I can see it now, she admitted during a group session, her voice unsteady. Every assumption I made was about how he looked, not what he said. I never actually listened. Not once. The training included direct conversations with passengers who had lived through similar treatment, people who had been questioned, delayed, made to feel unwelcome in spaces they had every right to occupy. Diane sat through those conversations in silence, absorbing each one like a blow she had earned. 1 week after the flight, Liberty Skyways released a public statement drafted with input from outside civil rights advisors. Patricia Vance did not merely acknowledge the incident. She owned it, fully, in front of cameras. What happened on Flight 812 reflects a systemic failure of our training, our culture, and our basic commitment to treating every passenger with dignity, Vance said. We are implementing sweeping changes to ensure nothing like this happens again. The changes were not cosmetic. Every boarding dispute now required mandatory documentation and supervisor review. Premium cabin challenges required secondary verification before a passenger could be turned away. Employee evaluations began, including specific bias awareness metrics. A new independent reporting app, developed in partnership with Carter Aerospace, allowed passengers to flag discriminatory treatment in real time, with cases tracked publicly for accountability. Diane completed her retraining and returned to work under strict probation. Her first flight back placed her deliberately on a route with a diverse passenger list and multiple premium bookings. "Good morning, sir." "Welcome aboard," she said to a young man in a university sweatshirt approaching first class, his boarding pass already in hand. "1A," he said, holding it out. "Right this way," Diane said warmly, without hesitation, without a flicker of the reflexes that had once cost her everything. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" It was a small, ordinary exchange. It was also, for Diane, the hardest thing she had done in months. 2 weeks after the flight, 3 other major airlines announced their own independent bias audits, unwilling to be the next headline. Regulators launched a broader industry review. Elijah appeared on a national business program to discuss what had happened, careful, as always, to frame it without cruelty. "This was never about ending one person's career," he said. "It was about building real accountability." Ms. Holloway has become one of the most effective voices for change in her company because she went through genuine transformation, not just punishment. The numbers backed him up. Diane's service ratings climbed steadily over the following months. She became, eventually, someone junior employees sought out when they were struggling with the very biases she had once refused to see in herself. 1 month after the flight, the new reporting app processed its 1,000th complaint, with the overwhelming majority resolved within a day. Customer satisfaction scores across the airline's premium cabins rose sharply. Diane was featured cautiously in an internal newsletter reaching well over 100,000 employees. "I used to think I was protecting something," she wrote. "I've learned that questioning whether someone belongs somewhere says far more about the person asking than the person being questioned. Every passenger deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing when they board." 3 months out, Carter Aerospace's audit model had been adopted, in some form, by several other airlines. Diane, against every expectation she'd once had for herself, was promoted to lead flight attendant, a small, hard-won redemption built entirely on the discomfort of confronting what she had done. 6 months later, Elijah Carter stood in front of a room of corporate executives at a national conference on workplace accountability. "The value of a real audit isn't in catching people doing something wrong," he told them. "It's in building a system where good people are given the tools to do better, and where harmful patterns don't get the chance to calcify into culture." Diane sat in that audience, now working as her airline's customer experience advocate. Her satisfaction scores remained among the highest in the company. "I never imagined I'd be grateful for the worst day of my career," she said during a panel discussion afterward. "But that flight forced me to look at something in myself I had never been willing to see. It didn't just change how I do my job. It changed how I see people." Melissa Tran, whose live stream had started it all almost by instinct, was later hired by an advocacy organization to document similar cases of institutional bias. Her platform grew into something, with real reach, real influence, built from a single moment she almost hadn't decided to record. And somewhere in that story is the real lesson, the one worth carrying with you, long after the video ends. Discrimination rarely announces itself with cruelty. It usually arrives quietly, in a dismissive glance, an assumption made before a single word is spoken, a certainty that refuses to check itself even when the evidence says otherwise. Diane Holloway wasn't a monster. She was someone who had let 12 years of unchecked assumptions calcify into something she genuinely believed was instinct. And it took losing almost everything, in front of thousands of strangers, for her to finally look at that instinct honestly. If you've ever watched something like this happen and wondered whether speaking up matters, remember Flight 8112. Remember that a phone held steady at the right moment and a willingness to not look away can force change that years of quiet complaints never could. The flight was delayed that day by exactly 31 minutes. But somewhere down the line, for the people it touched, on both sides of that aisle, arriving a little late turned out to matter far less than finally arriving somewhere better.